Late in Siddhartha Gautama's ministry, around 450 years before the Common Era, when India was on fire with his liberating message, people would come to him asking not, "Who are you?" not, "What is your name, your origin, your ancestry?" but, "What are you?" In other words, to what order of being do you belong? Are you an angel? Are you a god? To which the historical founder of Buddhism would answer every time very simply, "I am awake." That is what it means to be a Buddha, to be awake. But things didn't start out that way. The path towards awakening is a crooked one. It zigs and zags crazily. There is Buddha potential within everyone, but the story of how every individual person taps into that potential is always unique. It always incorporates adversity of some kind. This is as much true of the founder of Buddhism as it is for Unitarian Universalists like you and me. One legend has it that at Siddhartha's birth, his father, a king, summoned seers to divine his son's future. They all agreed with it that this was to be no ordinary child and that there were two remarkable possibilities before him, though only one could come true. He would become ruler of all India, or he would become a world redeemer. That is what the seers said, which led his father, the king, to make a decision. He would do everything within his power to ensure that the prince stayed the heck away from spirituality. In contemporary terms, we might say that he wanted his son to go for the business major as opposed to the major in philosophy. So the king surrounded his prince with every luxury imaginable, 3 palaces, 40,000 dancing girls. This is a legend, after all. Strict orders to servants that no ugliness was ever to intrude upon Siddhartha's courtly pleasures. Nothing to suggest that life might inflict hurts which everything a king might have, material wealth, pleasure, power, helpless to heal. That any of those things could be helpless to heal the true suffering. The man who awoke, he started fast asleep. There's not a straight shot to destiny in this hero story. For 20-odd years, Prince Siddhartha would live in a bubble of his father, the king's making. But then, one day, he went out into the countryside riding. It had been a long-time habit of his to go riding, though the king would insist that he would stay upon the regular paths from which he'd have servants clear anything away offensive. Except for this one day. One day, along the path, the prince encountered an old man, decrepit, broken-toothed, gray-haired, leaning on a staff and trembling. The prince had never seen anything like this before. Perhaps the psychological truth implied by the legend is this: there is a force in us that wants us to stay asleep. It wants us to stay asleep. But the spirit of life will not allow for that. Someone halfway across the world hacks into your Gmail account and starts sending emails to everybody you know, telling them that you are in London and all your money is stolen and you've been beat up, and would you send me some money? The disruptive thing can be zany, right? Or it can be deadly serious. The doctor says that you have cancer. The newspapers report that it's the hottest year on record, exceeding last year's record, which exceeded the record before. It's just ratcheting up, up, up. Life will not let us stay in the cozy cocoon of unknowing. During Siddhartha's second outing, he saw a body racked with disease. During a third, he saw a corpse. And then during the fourth, perhaps the most surprising sight of all, there by the roadside, a Hindu monk with shaven head, ochre robe, begging bowl, and peace. Peace in the midst of circumstances that, for all Siddhartha knew, given his experience up to that point, should never have been possible. But the impoverished monk was serene. And Siddhartha, the prince, despite his 3 palaces and 40,000 dancing girls, was not at peace. Buddhists call this the legend of the 4 passing sights, and it is said that these sights so overwhelmed the sensitive Siddhartha that he resolved then and there to give up the right to his father's throne, leave everything and everything he knew, and strike out on the spiritual quest, become a monk himself, find peace. And thus he entered the next phase of his life where, through trial and error, he developed a complete spiritual way of life. And ever afterwards, Buddhists have called this the Eightfold Noble Path, which is fundamentally a practical way. It is fundamentally a way of finding a balance between extremes. Not too much attachment to worldly things, but neither too much asceticism and self-mortification. And with this understood, do 8 things. Number 1, know some basic spiritual truths, like the 4 Noble Truths. More about those in a moment. Number 2, be serious about your desire to grow spiritually. Number 3, avoid gossip and cruel speech. Be kind and truthful with your words. Number 4, do not kill, steal, lie, drink alcohol, or abuse sex. Strive for right behavior. Number 5, avoid jobs that pollute your soul. Work at jobs that further the good life. Number 6, discover your own rhythm and steadily move at your own pace. Right effort. Number 7, develop your awareness and thinking skills. And number 8, learn how to meditate and practice it regularly. That's the Eightfold Path. Fairly easy to summarize, but Siddhartha almost died on the way to learning it. Fact is, it was Siddhartha's basic disposition never to do anything halfway. It wasn't enough for him just to resemble the Hindu monk who had shocked him out of his ignorance. It wasn't enough to just shave his head, put on the ochre robe, beg for all his meals, practice physical yoga postures, meditate regularly, fast periodically. Siddhartha had to outdo him, be the best monk ever. He was stubborn and strong-willed, unlike anybody else. That's who he was. To find peace, he was going to break the sensitive organ of his body that linked him to pleasure and pain. He was going to get beyond all of that. He was going to release the spirit trapped in the flesh. It got to the point that Siddhartha ate so little, only 6 grains of rice a day during one of his longer fasts, that he looked like a concentration camp victim. Until one day it just went too far. He collapsed. He was sick near death. He would have died if it had not been for his companions who nursed him back to health. Trial and error was how Siddhartha learned the wisdom of the middle way. You can't just pursue spiritual truth without taking care of your body, without giving it its due, what is necessary and natural. Of course, we say to that, but to get to today's common sense implied by a phrase like, of course, the Buddha of yesterday had to walk a crooked path. And so do we. We renounce our right to one kind of ego certainty only to assert another kind of ego certainty. If we won't be a prince, then we will be the best monk. Zig, zag. And so we learn. And now we turn to the last part of today's hero story. Young Siddhartha has just realized for himself the wisdom of the middle way. He has survived his mistakes so far. And now he continues on, still in search of enlightenment. One day, he sits under a bo tree near Gaya in northern India, and he intensifies his meditation practice. He vows that he will not be moved from his spot under the tree until he finds ultimate peace. And he is almost there. He is about to become fully awake. And guess who appears at the last moment? Not his father, the king. Not the monk he felt competitive towards. The evil one. A demon who will test Siddhartha to see if there is any unhealthy ego left in him, which can be inflamed. This is what the ancient Buddhist legends say. And as an intriguing side note, I want you to consider how we have the same kind of thing happening in legends about another spiritual teacher from a very different tradition, Jesus of Nazareth. There's something to this theme of last-minute temptation, something that cuts across space and time and suggests a truth about the basic human condition. Just when you are closest to awakening, that's the time of greatest danger. In other words, if there is ever a time when you cannot see your shadow, when you think your perspective is perfectly clear, when you think others are idiots and you yourself, only you, have the truth or are blameless, well, the devil's got you. You're in the hands of the evil one. Remember this in our time of crazy American politics. Remember this, Reverend Makar, in this time of crazy American politics. Okay, back to the story. The evil one approaches Siddhartha, meditating there under the bo tree, and thinks, well, I will distract him by inflaming his sexual desires. This young man of his father's court who used to enjoy the company of 40,000 dancing girls. So he assumes the form of Kama, god of desire, and all of a sudden it's raining women. It's women, beautiful women. They're beckoning everywhere, just like this, just like this. Just like this. I'm embodying my message for you this morning, all right? Going above and beyond the call of duty. I apologize for that. But Siddhartha remains unmoved. He's renounced his addiction to physical pleasure. He has come a long way since his days at court. So, the evil one thinks this. Well, here's what I'll do instead. I will distract him by making him afraid for his life. This man who was once so freaked out by old age, sickness, and death. So he assumes the form of Mara, Lord of Death. And all of a sudden, Siddhartha is surrounded by hurricanes and tsunamis and showers of flaming rocks. But Siddhartha allows the fear to come and go without clinging to it. It just comes and it goes. He has renounced his addiction to physical permanence. He's come a long way since the 4 passing sights. In final desperation, the evil one does this. He challenges Siddhartha's right to do what he is doing, says he's got no right. And this opens up a huge can of worms because it takes Siddhartha back to his own father, the king, and his disdain for spirituality, his disappointment in Siddhartha, who after all went for the philosophy major. Siddhartha has every right to nurture resentment towards this man who tried to keep him in the bubble, who sidetracked him from his destiny for more than 20 years. Yet Siddhartha has forgiven his dad. He has renounced his right to resentment. He stops clinging to it. Siddhartha touches the earth with his right fingertip, and the entire universe responds with 1,000, 100,000 roars. It is your birthright. It is your birthright. Just as it is the birthright of every Unitarian Universalist here in this space to seek and to find their own destiny. And that's when it happens. There, under the bo tree, near Gaya, northern India, the Great Awakening. The hero has overcome. The great prize is his. He sees. Now, exactly what he sees, he ends up proclaiming in his very first sermon, which he called Rolling the Wheels of Truth. And in that sermon, he speaks of 4 noble truths. And here's the first: life is suffering. Suffering is basic to the human condition: aging, sickness, death, enemies, resentment, suffering that seems random and arbitrary. Don't know why it's happening to you. Suffering which is a matter of being tied to something one dislikes. Suffering that's a matter of being separated from a person you love. So many forms of suffering. Life is suffering. But now what causes this? And this is the second noble truth. Suffering is caused by self-centered craving. Now, I mean, it's obvious that life is full of suffering, but if we truly knew this, why do we get so upset about it? Why does it shake us to the core every time? Something makes it so hard for us to accept the pains of life graciously and courageously. And the Buddha calls it tanha, habits of heart and mind, which cause us to cling to personal expectations and shoulds about the way that life has to be. We stew in the juices of our resentments and our angers, and so we suffer. So how do we stop this? And this leads to the third noble truth. To stop suffering, one must overcome self-centered craving through nirvana. Now, some people think that Buddhism is a real downer. All that life is suffering stuff. Yet with this third noble truth, we really have a true gospel. We have genuine good news. Suffering need not be the end of the story. There is a cure, and the cure is the nirvana experience, which is what Siddhartha had underneath the bo tree. Now, it can only be had firsthand, and this leads us into some perplexity. For how can people understand nirvana if they have never experienced it personally for themselves? Perhaps it is like the blowing apart of the walls of one's limited sense of self until all that is left is limitless compassion, limitless peace. And somehow you are still aware of your separate individuality, even as you feel its interconnectedness with everything else. And it is good. It is very good. And in the face of this sweetness, well, why not let all the expectations fall? Why not let all the shoulds fall? The evil one could come to you, throw everything at you, but there would be nothing to hit. There would be nothing in your soul that desire or fear or a sense of unworthiness could cling to. Perhaps this is what nirvana is like. But again, words are one thing, and direct experience is something altogether different. Which takes us to the fourth noble truth. The way to nirvana is through the Eightfold Path, and we have already been introduced to this, that eminently practical path to enlightenment. That is the Four Noble Truths. That is the very first sermon that Siddhartha Gautama, now a Buddha, preached, and I am so jealous. That's like a good sermon. But at this point, you need to know, and this is the last part of Siddhartha's hero story we're going to explore today, is that sermon almost never got preached. There was a thin slice of time in between Siddhartha's enlightenment and Siddhartha's sermon. And into that moment went the evil one. Y'all go, with me. In that moment. Just as in every horror movie, when you think the coast is clear, but nope. Jason, Freddy Krueger, some other incarnation of horror, despite the fact that they have sustained the kind of battering that would have demolished hundreds of people, they pop up. Horror happened to the newly born Buddha. Here's the fact. Upon experiencing nirvana, the Buddha almost walked away, almost gave up his ministry before it even began. The wheel of truth stuck before it even got started. What happened was this. The evil one blindsided him with a fourth and last temptation. Sucker punched him with the very worst temptation of all, exactly because it appealed to one of the Buddha's greatest strengths, his reason. Unitarian Universalists, if you have ears to hear, hear this. The evil one said to Siddhartha, good job with the whole Enlightenment thing. Nirvana is yours. But of all people, surely you can appreciate how impossible it will be to put nirvana into words. How can you do that? How can you teach what people can find only for themselves? How can you show people what can only be seen through their own eyes? So there you will be, going on and on about the secrets of spiritual enlightenment, and your audience won't know what the heck you're talking about. Such isolation and misunderstanding you will experience. You have no idea. Worse, others will step up. Teachers pretending to know, but only for the sake of duping others. Maybe they themselves are duped. For the sake of making money, gaining power, selling fake nirvana. Try to put the real deal into words and Buddha, and look what might happen. And with this, Siddhartha, the man who awoke, the man who became a Buddha, paused. Can you relate? Have you ever had a moment in which you dream a great dream and the hero path opens up before you and your star blazes brilliantly high above you, but then a voice of dry reason says, but is it possible? I wonder what might happen. I'm not going to talk about my Unitarian Universalist faith because it's not easy to summarize and most people won't get it anyhow. And you just can't dismiss the voice of reason here. Reason is essential. Reason keeps us safe. Reason keeps us connected to other people and to reality. Reason makes us very aware of how strange our many-sourced Unitarian Universalism is to folks who just know one way, one truth, one life religion. It is a crooked path to enlightenment. Yet what I am saying, what I believe is the ultimate message of this part of the Buddha story, is that we need more than reason to pursue the hero path. We need more than reason to dare what is great. If we stare too deeply into the complexities and possibilities of our future, we will be like that proverbial caterpillar who asks himself how he walks when he's got so many feet going on at the same time. Though he'd been doing just fine up till that point, upon realizing the complexity of it all, upon realizing that the life he inhabits is fundamentally a mystery, well, that's when he decides to control it. That's when he insists on calling the shots. That's when he puts ego square at the center, and that's when it all comes apart. The simplest thing, walking, becomes impossible. But it's not impossible when you have hope. When the evil one blindsided the Buddha with his rational argument, the Buddha paused for a moment, but only for a moment. And then he said, there will be some who understand. There will be some who understand. And you know the rest of this story. From the some who understood grew a world religion with billions of adherents today, which continues to transform lives, and it blesses us Unitarian Universalists today as well. But it was pure hope that took the historical founder of Buddhism over the top. Pure hope. May it put us over the top, too. Amen.